Hey, Jackie.
Hi, Mickey.
I should say for our podcast viewers, I'm Mickey Kaus, and I'm here actually where Bob Wright usually is. I've assumed his identity today, and I'm talking to Jackie Shire, who is a senior analyst. Is that right, for the Institute for Science and International Studies?
Right.
Do I have that even close to right?
That's right. That's right. For those in the non-proliferation world, it's known as ISIS.
And what does that do?
ISIS is a non-governmental organization, a non-profit group that works on issues of weapons proliferation, trying to expand our understanding of proliferation threats. And I'm doing a little bit of work for them on Iran right now.
And that's great. And just by accident, we're going to be talking about proliferation threats just today. I mean,
just by accident.
It's amazing. And I'm going to talk really fast because I've been listening to past blogging heads with this feature that's available on Windows Media, where you can listen at 1.5 and 1.2 times, and it's just great because it adjusts your tone so it doesn't sound like you don't sound like you're a chipmunk. It sounds like you're talking normally, just talking really fast. And why live life at 100% when you can live it at 150% speed? It seems like that should be the standard by which all television and all programs are watched, is 1.5 speed. And when you see a lot of these, you start talking really quickly. So I'm going to try to talk really quickly.
Okay.
The first topic we have is North Korea. There's been a little action on North Korea. There was a New York Times reported last week that we had some new approach that was sort of vaguely nicer. There was a Lugar initiative, but I just sort of don't. There's sort of basic things I don't understand about North Korea. But
well, North Korea is not called the Hermit Kingdom for nothing. But you're right. David Sanger had a piece in the New York Times on May 18, I think, outlining a kind of grand new plan that his sources told him the U.S. was prepared to launch, which is essentially, I think, in addition to the six-party framework of talks aimed at ending North Korea's nuclear program, Sanger was reporting that the U.S. was also prepared to talk about a formal end to the armistice agreement, which suspended hostilities in 1953.
And why has that been a hang-up? That's what I don't understand. Why do we have a hang-up about engaging in these bilateral talks?
You know, that's a really hard question to answer, particularly when you have the different examples of Libya and Iran and the same issue, the nuclear proliferation issue. And the Bush administration, I think, feels that bilateral talks are kind of a reward that has to be earned.
Right. We're not talking bilaterally with Iran either, right?
No, well, there's a chorus of people who are suggesting that, but the Bush administration has so far shown no inclination to take that approach.
For the same reward rationale.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, so with North Korea, it isn't clear to me yet, how much credibility to put in the Sanger report. I mean, obviously he has good sources, and he wouldn't have written that article for no reason. But there hasn't been a whole lot that's come out since his article appeared.
And I guess I take it that the other debate is whether if we did sort of launch this initiative, whether we really thought it would bring the Koreans to the table, or if it's just for show, so that in the case they don't come to the table, we don't get blamed for doing nothing.
Right. And then the whole North Korea thing, proceeds, halts, and goes in these fits and starts that are really hard to predict. And even the very claim that they've reprocessed all their plutonium and made about a half dozen bombs, no one's actually confirmed that. They haven't ever rolled one out for anyone to take a picture of.
Have people come to their calm down and realize that the North Korea thing isn't such a big deal, or is it still a big deal, but it's just overshadowed by the even bigger deal in Iran?
I think it's definitely a little overshadowed by the Iran situation. But, we can't forget that on the DMZ is a 1 million-man North Korean army, and if you understand Pentagon estimates, if they decided to launch an invasion, they'd be within a very short distance of Seoul. It is the most heavily militarized area in the world along the 38th parallel there. And North Korea is still that mystery wrapped in an enigma. We don't, the son hasn't proved to be any more transparent than his father in his leadership. So I don't think you ever want to discount totally the threat to peace and stability there.
And we've not ruled out first use of nuclear weapons if they do, if the worst happened and they did launch an invasion. Right?
I'm not so sure about that. I actually think that the U.S. has made promises. I think the U.S. actually has made some assurances that we would. I think we have made noises that we would not use nuclear weapons.
Okay. I guess what I'm driving at is there's a big debate on Iran whether the Iranians are deterrable. Is there a similar debate as to whether the North Koreans are deterrable? It seems to me that they're generally considered sort of more rational actors, although not completely rational, obviously, when compared with the mullahs in Iran. Or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I actually wouldn't. I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
I wouldn't describe more rationality to the followers of Juche philosophy in Pyongyang than I would to it. Actually, I think there would be people who would argue that the mullahs probably are more easily persuaded by the principles of deterrence.
Some of my best friends were followers of the Juche philosophy.
Yeah, there you go.
In the 60s.
Right.
It had a heyday on the student left when I was part of the student left.
Right. Yeah.
But okay, so because I guess we're going to get to Iran pretty soon. But I guess the other issue that's bandied about is, we need to solve the North Korea problem because then the Iranians will see that they're sort of taking their cue from North Korea, and if North Korea can hold out and develop its own nuclear weapons, why can't they? At the same time, if North Korea sort of folds its hand and settles for some aid in a peace treaty, that maybe the Iranians wouldn't develop their own nuclear weapons. The second half makes no sense to me. It seems to me the Iranians are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of what the North Koreans do. Yeah.
Iran's got its own agenda. It's following it in a very deliberate way. And I think the North Korea model is sort of out there, a little bit informing the dialogue and deliberations about what we do from a policy perspective. But I think Iran hasn't withdrawn from the NPT, which North Korea did. So to that extent, the North Korea model hasn't really held true as a precedent for Iran.
Right. Well, those are all my mysteries about North Korea.
Still a mystery.
There's the other precedent before we get to Iran. It would be Libya. That is held out certainly by people on the right as a tremendous success, and they attribute it, of course, to Libya being intimidated by our invasion of Iraq. I know there's a lively debate about that. But
there's a lot of excitement about Libya as the kind of the centerpiece success story of the Bush administration.
And is it?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that there's, a lot of good has come. I mean, do I sleep better at night because Libya has had its centrifuge components removed? Yeah, maybe a little bit. That one less country in the world with an absence of transparency over its weapons of mass destruction program. I think that's all a really good thing, and we should absolutely stand up and applaud that Libya has decided to re-enter the community of nations and renounce terrorism and start cooperating in a host of areas. So I think that is a really important laudable event. So you won't hear me being cynical or snarky about that.
But you would, when we were talking before, you had discovered something about the Libya deal that
right. Okay, yes. Libya had a nuclear program. They had made a lot of contact with the AQCON network, and they were in the process of acquiring a sizable number of centrifuges. They had an order for 10,000 of them.
Jesus.
That's a lot. You can make a lot of HEU with 10,000 centrifuges. It would take you still a little bit of time, but you could definitely, if those 10,000 were up and running, you would within a few months probably have enough HEU for a bomb. So it's not a small thing that Libya had this.
That's
plan.
More than Iran is planning, right?
Absolutely right. Now the fine print is that Libya didn't actually get anywhere close to to having 10,000 centrifuges. And what I think is interesting about this now is that Judith Miller, I think the first time I've seen her byline since she left the New York Times, had a two-part piece in the Wall Street Journal that I think was very prominently featured last Monday, either Sunday, Monday, or Monday, Tuesday.
Right. She's their new glamour hire, yeah.
Right. So very exciting. And she had incredible access for this story. Clearly had sources. She went to Libya to report the story, and she had a lot of help from folks in the U.S. government who had been part of the initiative to remove the WMD from Libya.
Right.
So she does sort of a tick-tock, if you will, of Libya's decision-making, how the involvement of Gaddafi's son in the negotiations with the British.
Right.
But there's one area in which I think her account isn't quite true to the historical record, and I think it's important when you're characterizing a country's WMD capability and ambition that you try to be as accurate as possible. And she writes in I think this is in the May 16 piece, that on the nuclear front, the situation was more troubling. Not only had Libya developed highly compartmentalized chemical and nuclear programs that were unknown even to the Libyans who worked at the facilities, they had already imported, she writes, 2 types of centrifuges from the Khan network. Aluminum P1s, this stands for Pakistan 1,
right,
and 4,000 of the more advanced P2s. Actually, that's not accurate. In fact, Libya had only managed to import the outer casings of these centrifuges. They had not imported more than, at the most, 200 or 220, maybe not even that many, of the rotors, which comprise the most sensitive part of the centrifuge.
This is the P2 centrifuge.
This is of the P2 centrifuge, right? Which, by the way, Iran has an R&D program for the P2 and still doesn't. It's not really, well, it's not clear, but probably not really up and running in a very robust way.
There was a big kerfuffle like a few weeks ago when
there's a kerfuffle
when the president of Iran implied that he had the P2 technology.
Right. Well, yeah, we can get to that.
Okay.
But yeah.
We don't have to.
But that's right. Yeah. So a great story by Judith Miller, great reporting, but I think it's just really important to kind of set the record straight that Libya didn't actually have 4,000 P2 centrifuges.
So,
they only had some parts. For
you mean Judith Miller exaggerated a WMD threat?
Just a little bit.
Who would have thought it?
I don't know.
But it does sound like the general bigger picture is that Libya was not a small accomplishment, or is that just administration spin? That it's a
there's a little bit of spin in the Libya story. It was clear, I think, that they had this plan to build a uranium enrichment facility. It's not clear how quickly it was going anywhere, and it's not clear that Iran is learning now how hard it really is to make it all work, to make the rotor spin, and to make the material flow through it. It's not an easy thing, and what the Khan network was doing was extremely dangerous.
Right.
And it's great that was intercepted, but it's not clear that Libya was really
right,
in an advanced state of pursuit of this capability.
It's always seemed implausible to me that our invasion of Iraq didn't help produce the favorable result in Libya. Do you dispute that, or do you think it's...
Well, I mean, Judith Miller in this story has some great detail about that, and about how I think after 9/11, Gaddafi started to get very worried, and then after the Iraq invasion, even more worried, and was making sort of panicked phone calls, she writes, to Hosni Mubarak, and really wanting to kind of put his WMD programs on the table. Very, very nervous that he was the next target in the regime change crosshairs.
And I think it's a little like everybody in Hollywood thinking that they're going to be the next target of 9/11. He probably exaggerated his importance. But,
right, maybe.
But you said that even Iran wanted to put its nuclear program on the table for a brief moment after the invasion. For a brief moment,
yeah. There were some signals that Iran had made that overture and that they were rebuffed. And I think now maybe we would have taken a different approach, but hindsight's always 20/20.
But it's not like it's an opportunity missed, because even if we had taken them up on that offer, they would have rescinded it as soon as they saw we were getting into trouble in Iraq, right?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I mean, they wouldn't say, oh, well, we have a contract with you, so we're going to stick by our agreement. They're going to say, well, the facts on the ground have changed, and we wanted to give up our nuclear program before, but now we're not scared of you anymore.
You know, Iran, as I said, has had a really deliberate nuclear agenda. And if we had had a deal with them in 2003, would they still be abiding by it now? I don't know. But I don't know. I mean, that will always be something we don't know. You know, did we have an opportunity and did we miss it? And now we're faced with something much worse.
Well, let's talk about Iran since we're talking about Iran. What I don't understand is it seems to me there's sort of three basic approaches. There's the military strike, which you talked about last time, which is very risky and has all sorts of bad consequences. Yeah. There's the let's sort of use sanctions to try to sort of pressure them into some sort of deal. And then there's the what I call the kill them with kindness approach, which is you sort of lay off many of the sanctions, especially economic sanctions, and you try to sort of be nice to them and sort of trade with them and sort of encourage the inevitable development along the sort of what we used to call the capitalist road, and that by itself would undermine the regime. So hopefully, one would hope by the time that they develop nuclear weapons, it would be a different kind of regime. It seems to me the middle ground, which is the one we seem to be pursuing, is the worst of both worlds. It's not going to stop them from getting the bomb, yet it's going to piss them off. So by the time they get the bomb, they're going to be angry at us. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I don't. Okay, Iran's already angry, right?
Right.
Okay, so we've got that.
Well, parts of Iran are angry. I mean, the elites may be, the people may like us better than the elites.
Yeah.
Or no?
Gosh, this is, Iran scholars spend huge amounts of time talking about, this issue about how, what's the vibe about America on the street,
right.
and are we alienating the people we really want to support us by pursuing this kind of hard line
right.
agenda? And if we bomb Iran, and we're yeah. So a couple things. The nuke program is really popular throughout Iran. Someone, I think Ken Pollack, pointed out in his Senate testimony that the reason it's really popular is that it hasn't there hasn't been a price that's had to be paid by the average Iranian for its country's decision to pursue the nuclear fuel cycle. In other words, maybe if there were some financial sanctions or some targeted sanctions, suddenly the man on the street who's really proud of his country's technical accomplishments would have a different feeling about it. So there's that.
Isn't it just as likely that the sanctions would serve as an excuse for Iran's economic problems, and that it would be like Cuba, they just hate us more?
Right. There is right now this big package of carrots and sticks that the European Union is getting ready to put before Iran. It's actually going to be this Wednesday. There's going to be a big meeting, and Iran's going to get to see this package, parts of which have already been leaked and talked about in the media. But the core elements of the package, which of course I haven't seen, but what my understanding is that the EU has gotten together, and they're prepared to offer Iran access to very advanced light water reactor technology. And to get that technology, Iran's going to have to agree to give up its domestic uranium enrichment facility. Iran continues to maintain that it likes its uranium enrichment just where it is, and is not, favorably inclined to accept the EU offer.
I mean, if they go down the EU path, they could not develop a bomb.
If they accept the EU offer, they cannot develop a bomb. Yes, there's two routes to the bomb. There's the uranium route and there's the plutonium route. Iran's continuing to work on a heavy water reactor, which is many years away from completion. And part of the deal would be that they'd also have to stop construction on the heavy water reactor. So yeah.
I guess if a bomb is the aspiration of not just the elites but the actual Iranian people, and if it sort of makes sense given the neighborhood of the world they're in with at least one neighbor who has a bomb, is there any chance that they would accept this deal and give up their nuclear aspirations?
I don't like to be super pessimistic. I like to sort of think that, yes, there is an element in Iran that really sees that this could be a positive thing. No sign of that right now. There's no sign right now that this regime, this administration in Iran is going to take the EU offer. And you know, the other side of the carrots, by the way, are the sticks. And the sticks are, you know, right now they're talking about banks in Europe or yen and euro accounts held by Japanese and European banks of Iranian funds, you know, freezing or restricting access to those accounts. That's sort of a first step. Right. On the rung of targeted sanctions. You know, will those have an impact? Are those enough? Is that enough to? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if you were looking at it right now, what would you say the odds that Iran will end up with a bomb are? This is a subtle segue to another topic I wanted to bring up.
Okay, so Iran, you know, worst case scenario estimates of Iran's time to a bomb are about 3 years, and that's if everything goes really well for them and everything, the uranium enrichment program works perfectly. And they decide to pursue the bomb.
Right.
And what you can say is that they haven't made the political decision to pursue the bomb. They've just simply put the pieces in place to allow them to get the bomb when they want it.
Right. But I mean, I guess because the second issue is if they do get the bomb, how horrible is that? Are they deterrable? And there was a very good article by Paul Starobin in the National Journal, I think it was, basically arguing that of course they're deterrable. But the more I read the article, the more it scared me because it did not seem an analogous situation to the Soviet Union. And there are like 5 grounds on which it seemed the idea that, you know, Iran could be deterred by mutually assured destruction the way we deterred the Soviets wouldn't work. One, you have to assume that they're rational the way the Soviets were. And if you have this guy, Ahmadinejad, is that right?
Right.
Running around saying things that can only be, attacking Israel, things that can only be explained by the fact that he probably really believes them, and he sent this somewhat apocalyptic, letter to President Bush where he assumed the mantle of leadership for the whole Islamic world against the insidious forces of liberal democracy. So the question is, and he believes in martyrdom and the hidden imam, and so is he rational? There's always the threat of miscalculation in a mutually assured destruction world. I mean, we almost came to nuclear blows, came to a nuclear exchange with Russia over Cuba, and right. Russia was fairly rational, and we had lines of communication. The most important thing is, I know this is a point Bob wanted to bring up. Suppose they smuggle a bomb in a suitcase to the United States and it goes off.
All right.
We can trace that to them, right?
Yeah, wait, okay. By the way, all those things you just listed, very, very good reasons to work really hard to stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
Right.
Okay, that having been said, the terrorist bomb in the suitcase, I'm just not buying that as a really significant risk. There's this whole mythology about the suitcase nuke. Does it even exist? And, people can go online and find all kinds of conspiracy theories about this. And there was a Russian General Lebed who made the claim initially, I think, about Russia having made all of these suitcase bombs, and some of them have gone missing. And then someone, I think, at the Federation of American Scientists tried to unravel that story a little bit and trace it back and just to try to put to rest concerns about the suitcase nuke. And the closest I think we've gotten to understanding this issue is that the Soviet Union and the United States, the Soviet Union sort of paralleled the American bomb program. So when we would launch some innovation with our nuclear weapons, they mirrored it
right.
a little bit. And one or both of us made small nuclear weapons. They were not close to being suitcase size, however. They were actually more like big trunks that required about 2 people to maneuver them. And so the bottom line is there's no evidence that Iran that anyone really can make a nuclear weapon small enough to fit inside a suitcase.
Well, but what about a cargo container? I mean, those are pretty big.
Right. Okay, so setting aside the sort of technological hurdle of a small nuke,
right.
Then you've got the issue of would a state, a country, do something like that?
Well, and during the nuclear shield debates, the Star Wars debate, the left said, "Oh yeah, well it's stupid to have Star Wars because they're going to smuggle it in through the ports. They're not going to launch a missile." So now Now the left is turning around and saying, oh, no, this isn't a threat.
Yeah, this is not a threat. Look, I mean, there are all kinds of things to worry about, and a dirty bomb being smuggled in is something we can worry about. But a nuclear weapon, Iran smuggling it into the United States and detonating it, I put that pretty low on the list of probable events. And then there's this issue which I think Bob had mentioned about could you trace it back to Iran? And the answer is yes.
Well, we could trace it back, but that's the scenario I wanted to.
And so if you do trace it back and you find that Iran was the source of this weapon, I mean, my God, Iran's faces massive retaliation.
Well, they face, but let's look at that situation. Assume that I realize you think this isn't a real threat, but suppose a bomb goes off somewhere in the U.S. We look at the chemical signature and we trace it back to Iran. Iran says, no, it's not our bomb. And if it is a bomb, some rogue element stole it. And are you really going to incinerate Tehran for this somewhat strained chain of events? I don't think we would. We're not going to blow up Iran just because some forensic scientist claims that the signature of the bomb showed it came from Iran. We have to see a missile coming from Iran to blow up Iran.
We might not blow up Iran with nuclear weapons if a nuclear device detonated in the United States with chemical signature tracing it back to Iran. Maybe we wouldn't launch a nuclear strike back at Iran, but things would look very different in Tehran within a short time of that event transpiring, whether it was Iran's fault or not. I mean, I just think that there'd be no way.
Well, but that's not the logic of mutually assured destruction. Well, the leadership of Iran survives, the infrastructure then survives, and they could say they won that exchange. They destroyed New York, and Tehran was badly damaged.
Well, the logic of MAD is that Tehran doesn't launch the strike in the first place because it knows it's going to endure this retaliation. So I think MAD does. I mean, I don't think Iran's going to do this, and I think that Iran is going to be deterred because of the overwhelming retaliation that will rain down on it should it ever, do that.
Okay, point two is even if Iran is deterred, there's still a danger because it sets off an arms race in the area.
Right. That's a more realistic issue. And Iran's Arab neighbors are not at all happy about the idea of Iran having a nuclear capability because it allows Iran, even if the bomb stays in the basement, to assert its traditional regional dominance, hegemony, to use an IR theory term.
Right.
That's not something Saudi Arabia wants to see. I don't really buy this argument that some people make that if Iran gets the bomb, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, like dominoes, suddenly start having bomb programs too. I'm not persuaded by that. But
well, if Iran has the bomb and then Israel says yes, we have the bomb too, then it seems to me there's a lot of popular pressure on Egypt to not play second fiddle to Israel, no?
Yeah, look, everyone knows Israel has the bomb, and Egypt's been living with that fact for a while.
Okay, but it hasn't been rubbed in their face.
Yeah, you say that, but...
well, why hasn't Israel announced it has the bomb? There's obviously some reason they're holding back, and they don't want to. It's because they don't want to humiliate the Egyptians.
For the same reason, Iran might not announce it has the bomb. Ambiguity works. It serves lots of objectives.
Huh.
And nuclear ambiguity has a special place in security policy, and I think that it might be where we end up in this situation. And by the way, how do you factor in the kind of India-Pakistan model of MAD? Those are two countries that are totally outside the NPT framework with the bomb.
And they've been very well behaved since they got it, too, right?
They've been pretty well behaved, right?
Well, they've managed to contain various possible flare-ups.
Right. Well, Pakistan didn't contain the Khan network, but India and Pakistan with each other have not engaged in the level of hostility that one might have imagined.
That's a good point, but I guess the argument would be that they're both much more rational actors than
Tehran?
Than Tehran seems to be at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. Ahmadinejad's kind of a separate thing. Setting aside him,
right?
I still say in Tehran you're talking lots of rational actors in charge.
Well, you've persuaded me, but I'm not an expert.
Okay,
and you are.
Start.
So I'll have to go load up on more ammunition and be ready for you next time.
Okay. All right.
Now we're on to something that I claim to know something about, although that's probably not true. immigration reform. And you had some questions about that?
Yeah, I'm really, this is one of these issues that, I try to follow, and then I feel like I lose the bubble, and then I tune in to Meet the Press, and I catch it again, and then I'm anyway, I would, yeah. I mean, I've read a couple of things that seem very sane and rational to me, but apparently there's still a lot of debate about. And then I read something that I think you read that I'll sort of share later that seemed completely mangled, and I'll be interested in your thoughts. So basically, there are these two pieces of draft legislation.
Right.
If I understand correctly, there's the House and there's the Senate.
Right.
And one of them is kind of sane, and the other one, not so much.
Well, I would disagree with that. The standard position is that the House is insane because the House focuses only on half of the problem, which is sealing the borders and preventing more illegals from coming into the country, and ignores dealing with the illegals who are already here. Do we grant them amnesty? Do we, try to get them to be frustrated and go back home? What do we do? Those are two parts of the problem, and Bush wants to address both of them at once. In other words, you seal the border and you grant some sort of legalization.
Okay, wait. Are we building a wall? Do we build a wall on the border?
Well, that's a subset of the question of how do you seal the border. I favor a wall.
You do?
And I think Bob favors a wall, too, on the grounds that, a wall is very benign. A wall doesn't do anything for the people who are already here. It doesn't hurt them. It doesn't punish them. It doesn't make their lives more miserable. It just stops more people from coming.
But
it seems like the simplest thing to do. The only problem with it is it seems to be an insult to Mexico, but they can get over that.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to get hung up on just parts of this what's a much bigger issue, but the wall is a big visual statement. You're right.
Well, it's a visual statement we want. We want people who are in Peru and El Salvador and Brazil and Guatemala to say, "Oh, I can't go up north anymore. There's this big wall. I saw it on TV." That's a good thing.
Right, but experts say the wall isn't really going to stop people from coming over.
It's not going to completely stop. It'll stop 90% of them. That's all you need. I mean, walls traditionally work. I mean, there's a wall between North Korea and South Korea, isn't there? And sure, people.
I think there's a lot of barbed wire and scary dogs.
Okay.
And very terrifying North Korean.
I mean, the wall basically worked to keep people in East Germany. It seems to be working on the West Bank.
Yeah, but it was a source of the wall. That was a source of years of horrifying visual images of people being shot trying to cross. I mean, it just seems like this the country we are. This is not what we're about. The wall is not what we're about.
Well, we're not going to shoot people. We're going to catch them and send them back. So that's going to be different.
All
I mean,
right,
I have a wall. I have a wall around my house.
All right. So setting aside the wall issue, what's up with the house the felony make illegal?
Well, they've backed off the felony. I mean, the felony was a mistake. They were trying to rationalize the laws and make it equal to other felonies, and they realize it's a mistake, and basically they've announced they're not going to do that.
Okay.
So
all right.
if you tar them with the felony, it's sort of demagogic at this point. They've basically said, "You're right, that was a mistake. We're going to make it a misdemeanor."
Okay, so what's your preferred outcome of this legislative debate?
The problem is Fred Barnes this week says there's a national consensus that we should secure the border and legalize the people who are here. I don't think there is a consensus, but I agree that those are both reasonable goals. The issue at hand is, do we do them at the same time? Because the chances are that securing the border won't work, and the legalization will attract millions of more people. So if you do them at the same time as Bush and the Senate want to do, you have this potential disaster scenario where the wall is as effective, the enforcement is as effective as, say, Bush's attempts to bring order to Iraq, or Bush's attempt to bring aid to the victims of Hurricane Katrina, i.e. it doesn't work at all. But the legalization is in place and attracts millions of people, so we basically double the illegal population, and we don't do anything for enforcement. And that's the problem with doing them both at once. The House approach, which has sort of been semi-embraced by Hillary Clinton, is you first secure the border, and then we sort of know that we're going to grant some sort of legalization amnesty, but we don't talk too loudly about it, and we certainly don't have them go into effect at the same time, but maybe a few years down the road, that's the obvious thing to do. But first we secure the border, and it's a timing question, and that second form of timing, which is what would happen if they passed the House bill, is quite rational. If you have a magnet drawing people onto your land, you want to make sure your fence is in place before you turn the magnet on. So
do you believe that, let's say you're in the U.S. illegally, your student or your tourist visa expired,
right,
and you're here, and you've been here for, let's say, 6 years,
right,
and you've had some jobs, you've been paid maybe off the books as a busboy or a waiter, or
right,
but you've kind of gotten into the system. You have an apartment,
right,
maybe you even have a driver's license. You got one somewhere. So what should happen with that person?
That person keeps doing whatever they're doing, and once we secure the border, then maybe we think about letting them become a citizen. But we don't announce, hey, if you come to America, chances are you're going to get an amnesty before we make sure that the people who were responding to that can't get into America. That's
right. It just seems like securing the border is a little bit of a red herring issue. I mean, the border is so porous in so many different ways. It's not just this physical place along the U.S.-Mexican border. It's
right,
ocean, and it's airplanes, and it's. I'm just not sure. And what's the most rational, sane plan for securing the border? Is it National Guard troops?
No, I don't think anybody thinks that. No, the most rational plan is a